Over the last few generations of Pokemon, more and more lore is being based on an ancient art known as alchemy, the precursor to chemistry and a combination of science, spirituality, and magic. And this series of videos aims to cover it all. This is Pokemon Alchemy. Last time we talked about Solgaleo's origins in alchemy, being based on the alchemical lion, which is an amazing t-shirt design you can get now, link in the description, and this alchemical lion purifies metals and can open seals to portals to the 7 metallic spirits, which is the bonds that the 7 metals and the 7 planets in alchemy share. And today, we are going to cover the alchemic origins of Lunala, but first I should mention that the ending bit of this video crosses into Solgaleo a lot. So this video isn't just Lunala, it is Lunala and then Lunala and Solgaleo as a duo. And I should mention that Game Freak took some creative liberties and gave Lunala the same powers as Solgaleo, that being the power to open portals to ultraspace. Though, that's based more on the power of the green lion devouring the sun, but to keep the two versions of the game similar, they gave Lunala this power as well, despite it not being in line with Lunala's alchemic origin. But that's not to say that Lunala has nothing to add by itself, however. Lunala's origins are more in astrology rather than pure alchemy, though this is fine, as more often than not, if you were an alchemist, you were also an astrologist, as the two go hand in hand, which is why the two share so many symbols. Now then, the only such bat of the moon in alchemy and astrology dates back to the 14th century Book of Wonders, an Arabic manuscript on astronomy, astrology, and divination. It depicts the moons as having a woman's face and bat wings, while being held up by Cancer of the zodiac. Having a woman's face fits perfectly. Throughout all of alchemy and astronomy, the moon represents the feminine powers, and the sun the masculine powers. This is reflected by Solgaleo of the Sun being an obviously male lion, and it being said to be the male evolution of Cosmion, and Lunala having more feminine features and a more feminine name, as well as it being said to be the female evolution of Cosmion. The Batwing's association with the moon is fairly straightforward. Bats are a nocturnal creature coming out at night. As for Cancer, here things begin to get interesting again. Cancer is said to be ruled over by the moon. As such, according to astrology, those born under Cancer are said to feature more feminine traits, having strengths such as tenacity, being highly imaginative, emotional, sympathetic, and being persuasive. Cancers tend to like art and other home-based hobbies like knitting, baking, quilting, etc. They also tend to be very loving and caregiving, especially towards their own family, though the weaknesses of Cancer are that they can be moody, pessimistic, suspicious, manipulative, and insecure. As you can probably tell, most of these tend to be strengths and weaknesses associated with the much more feminine of us all. Cancer is also associated with water, and is often depicted as having pearls embedded in its shell. Pearls are a symbol of the finer parts of aquatic life, which makes sense as they are a biological bit of jewelry found in clams and oysters. This is also referred to by the Generation 4 Pokemon Palkia, the dragon water-type controller of space, which is associated with pearls, as space is often boundless and open, much like many ancient depictions of the ocean before we knew the Earth was round. The ocean just keeps going. But we'll save the Gen 4 legendaries for later. Back to Lunala, its design may also pull from the Egyptian goddess Nuit, who is often depicted as containing all of the stars in her body and within her reach. She embraces the world to cast it into night, much like Lunala. Egyptians are said to have been one of the founders of ancient alchemy, and because of that, various alchemic cults all the way into the early 1900s, such as the Thelema, would worship 3 Egyptian gods, Ra, Hor-Kahuit, Hadit, and Nuit. As such, Nuit is the most important Egyptian goddess for alchemists, meaning borrowing design elements from her for Lunala in your game heavily inspired by alchemy works out perfectly. And that is it for Lunala specifically, not nearly as much as Solgaleo, so let's use the last chunk of this video to talk more about this duo of Pokemon, Solgaleo and Lunala together. This duo, of course, are the emissaries or representatives of the sun and the moon. And alchemy is all about its representations and symbols. This is what is known as a transmutation circle. It's a magical circle that alchemists would do their experiments in. Oftentimes, their experiments involved changing one thing into another, hence the term transmutation. These symbols served two purposes. For the more chemistry-based alchemist, they used these symbols to represent the elements they would place in each location on the circle. They were just notes, essentially. But for the more spiritually inclined alchemists, they believed that by placing certain symbols and texts within and around the circles, they could better call upon the powers of the elements and their planetary bonds. Their spirits, essentially. Drawing these symbols as representatives or emissaries of their respective planets would draw in their powers to help in their transmutation. The symbol of the sun and the moon were both very frequently used, as they are the two most powerful planets. Remember, in alchemy, the sun and the moon are both planets, and they are represented by the two most valuable metals at the time, gold and silver. And, as mentioned, the sun and moon are representative of the masculine and the feminine powers. Together, they form a perfect pair and can create life. In the case of the sun and moon, this is done thanks to the light that they give off, and the tides and seasons they create. And in humans, it's sex. Celestial sex is a term often used to describe what happens during a solar eclipse, when the moon passes directly between the sun and the earth. It's a conjoining of the powers that cultures throughout history and all around the world associate with new beginnings, new life, and even portals to another realm. That realm usually being the land of the dead, but in Pokemon they take it literally and give both Solgaleo and Lunala the ability to open portals to Ultraspace, which is another universe. And if they can do that alone, then imagine what sort of power, what sort of portal they could create while together. Back to the actual eclipse though, many cultures and alchemists believed that they were not only symbols of celestial sex, but also that it was a new era for the universe. The old universe dies out and a new one is born instantaneously. Infinity gets reset, as it were, as an eclipse is an event which purifies Azoth to its most pure form. But what is Azoth? Azoth is, long story short, essentially the power of God, the power of Aether, which is all of the elements combined. Azoth is the power of the spirit. It's what souls are made of. It is infinity energy, which just so happens to be a thing that Pokemon has been talking about a lot lately. Infinity energy. Pokemon even references Azoth twice, and that's just so far. Once with the Azoth Kingdom in the Volcanion movie, and with a music track in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire's soundtrack, being titled Azoth. We'll talk more about that in a later video. Moving on to another tangent, not to sound sexist or anything, people these days are very sensitive, and after all, alchemy is an ancient thing, but it should be noted here for future reference in this series that in alchemy, the sun does reign over the moon, and is much more pure and more powerful, both in a scientific and alchemical sense. After all, the moon only shines light because of the light it absorbs and reflects back to us. Its source of light is still the sun. And this is also reflected in the symbolism of both the masculine and the feminine powers. The bulk of alchemists look to the story of Adam and Eve for confirmation of this. Eve was created as a companion to Adam, though Adam was the first human, humanity in its purest. Throughout most of human history, men have been the leaders, the most powerful and dominant sex. And when looking at the masculine powers of dominance, raw strength, war, and logic, it makes sense historically. This is shown in alchemy as the sun is the center of the metal symbols, and symbolizes gold, and gold is the purest of the earthly metals. The only one higher is platinum, which is symbolic of God rather than man. But as psychologists, historians, Bible interpreters, and alchemists alike state, though the masculine powers are more powerful and dominant, what are they without the feminine powers? Fathers are typically seen as the head of the household, but what good is a head with no body? As the tale of Adam and Eve states, Eve is a companion and complement to Adam. They complete one another. The raw strength becomes refined, just as many alchemic depictions show. While the solar light is strong on its own, and much stronger than lunar light, it is only when the solar light is reflected and refined through the moon that you can get a more pristine and specialized light, especially in a spiritual sense. While the sun is the biggest and most powerful force in the solar system, it is meaningless without the moon, as it takes both for life to exist on Earth. And though the sun is strong, it is also far, while the moon is closest to us, giving us protection and guidance, both in a spiritual sense and with lunar calendars, which were most commonly used at the time of alchemists. Just as the father of the household will be the one working out on the farm and going to war, showing his strength distantly, it's the mother who guides, cares for, and protects us much closer. As such, the sun and moon were seen as the masculine father and feminine mother of the earth, which comes right back into celestial sex, bringing a new era of life to the universe, beginning it all over again when the sun and moon combine in an eclipse. The only thing missing from this bond to have pure and ultimate permanent power over the whole universe would be if they gained total control of the Azoth by forming its backbone of sun, moon, and prism. So being that Solgaleo and Lunala went together could theoretically have the power to take control of the universe, where does that put them on the hierarchy of Pokemon? We know that Arceus is at the top, taking the role of the Judeo-Christian god in alchemy. We'll have a video on that later. And most commonly then, you have Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina directly below Arceus, taking control of space, time, and antimatter. Though antimatter is debatable, it's more likely to be gravity, as this video here will explain. But, as many alchemic illustrations show, Solgaleo and Lunala would be the ones directly below Arceus, as when combined, they have control over light and infinity. God's power. Azoth. Whereas Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina are just the individual forces that hold the universe together. Pfft. And somewhere down the line from Solgaleo and Lunala is Ho-Oh and Lugia, the Phoenix and Aquilus. One brings the sun's power to the earth, and the other brings the moon's power to the oceans, controlling the tides. This would also work out well, as the sun and moon are represented on Earth by gold and silver, which just so happens to be the games Ho-Oh and Lugia are from. But that will be delved into later. So, what do Ho-Oh and Lugia have to do with all this? What is this Azoth really all about? And what's going on with Necrozma merging with Solgaleo and Lunala? That one is next, on our delve into Pokemon Alchemy. So, until next time, please remember to never stop using your noggin, and hey, if you would like to support this channel through donation or by looking at some apps, or buying an awesome t-shirt like this one and a few others, there are links to all of that in the description, and it is highly, highly appreciated. Thank you so much. See you next time.